Welcome to Parents and Teens Rising, the podcast that bridges the gap between parents and teens and helps families thrive. I'm Jasmine Chandler, teen and parent coach, wilderness rites of passage guide, and founder of Guided Passages. After over 16 years of working with young people, I know how challenging and rewarding these years can be. Each week, we'll explore real conversations, practical tools, and fresh perspectives to help you connect with your teen, support their confidence, and navigate the ups and downs. Let's rise together. Hey everyone, welcome back into the podcast. Thanks so much for being here. How are you doing today? How are you holding up with everything going on in the world? Are you enjoying the shift into fall with all of the cooler temperatures and all of the leaves and all of that? I personally am really enjoying it. I'm loving, just all the fall colors, the cool temps. Yesterday was an absolutely gorgeous day over here in Southern Oregon. There was blue skies, it was like 70 or something like that. I went to an outside event with my mom, and it was just really wonderful to be outside on a beautiful day in the fall with lots of joyous people, lots of camaraderie and good feelings. So that was really wonderful. And today it's raining here. So that's really sweet too. I used to be, someone that didn't really enjoy the rain. I would really just only like it when it was sunny outside. But, since we've had so many years of drought and wildfires and all of those things, it's like now when we get the rain, it's just like a blessing. It's actually something that I don't take for granted anymore, that I realize how absolutely essential it is to all of life. And so when it comes, it feels really good and beautiful. And it's so awesome to be out of wildfire danger. I saw the little barometer down at the bottom of my hill where it says, what level of fire danger we're in. It was extreme, for most of the summer, and it's all the way down to moderate or whatever that is, the very lowest one in the green. So that's amazing. So that feels good. And then I actually had the house to myself last night. My daughter was over at a sleepover. My boys were down in, I think, the Bay Area in California at a baseball tournament. And so I just had this, wide open space at home by myself, which I really value. I really love getting alone time. I actually really need alone time to recuperate. It's one thing that I enjoy most of all. But one of my best friends actually came over last night, and we got to do beadwork together and hang out and just talk for hours. And so, yeah, it's been a really great weekend so far. And just, preparing myself for the week ahead and all of that. So anyway, I've got something on my mind today that's been coming up a lot in my coaching sessions with teens. And one of the things I coach teenagers on is how to regulate their emotions and understand what's happening inside their brains and nervous systems when they're triggered. Because when they become more aware of what's going on in their mind and body, they can start to catch themselves before they have a total meltdown or before they fly off the handle, start screaming and yelling or, throwing temper tantrums or whatever it might be. And they can use some practical tools to step away, to calm down, and to come back to their center. So often, though, the challenges teens face around emotional regulation, explosive reactions, respect, and communication are actually reflections of what's been modeled for them and what they see happening in their own home. So when a young person grows up in an environment where emotions often boil over, where there's yelling, there's slammed doors, maybe silent treatments, or harsh reactions, that becomes their template for how to handle conflict and strong emotions. Now, I'm not saying that this is always the case, because there are plenty of examples where teens come from really calm and regulated homes, and they're just simply dysregulated themselves for whatever reason that might be. But the truth is that a lot of the work of helping our teens build healthy emotional skills and learn to communicate calmly starts with us as parents. Our behavior sets the tone. When we can model regulation, empathy, and respectful communication, we're showing them what's possible. If we simply send our teen to coaching or therapy, hoping someone else is going to fix them, but we're not willing to look at our own reactions or patterns, then they don't really have a safe space to practice those new skills. And instead, the same cycles of powerlessness and anxiety and disconnection keep repeating. So that's what I want to talk with you about today. How we as parents guardians and caregivers of teenagers can really begin to shift our own dysregulated and outdated habits and responses. When we do this inner work, we start to transform the entire dynamic in our homes. We rebuild connection, trust, and harmony with our teens, and we show them the way, not by telling them what to do, but by modeling it ourselves. So today's episode is all about empowering us as parents to do our own work, like really do our own work, to look at and begin healing those harmful generational patterns, to learn how to regulate our own emotions, and to show up as the solid, calm, and grounded parents we've always wanted to be. And that's the part we actually have direct control over anyway. Even if I send my teen to a therapist or a coach to get support with regulating their emotions, I can't control if they'll be receptive to the information, if they'll be willing to apply the information, or if they'll actually start to make some changes in their patterns and behaviors. I can line up all the supports in the world for them, but I don't ultimately have control over how they're going to utilize and apply that support. That's why it's so powerful to focus my energy and time on what I actually can control, which is always myself. My thoughts, my actions, my habits, my ability to regulate my own emotions, the way I show up, the words I say, all of those things, right? And that has so much power. The work we do on ourselves as parents absolutely helps our kids to make huge changes within themselves. So today, I'm going to walk you through 5 key ideas to help you take real actionable steps toward that change. All right, so first of all, I want to share my own story as a mom of going from very dysregulated, very reactive, to a lot more calm and a lot more regulated and able to hold space and model the behavior that I want to see for my kids. Many of you have heard me talk about these things before, but when my kids were young, I was very reactive. I yelled all the time. I got explosive sometimes. I gave the silent treatment. I slammed doors. I did lots of things that I look back on with almost embarrassment or shame, but I've, been able to forgive myself for those things, knowing that I was doing the best that I could at the time. But that's just the reality, that I did not know what the heck I was doing. And my behaviors really showed that I didn't know how to handle it when my kids pushed my buttons, or when they didn't listen to me, or when they had a misbehavior. I got very heated. I would get very reactive. I would snap at them. Just lots of different things. And ultimately, by the time my oldest son was, a preteen, 10, 11, 12, he and I were really battling it out all the time together. There was a lot of moments of just ugly stuff in my home where I would push back at him. He would push back at me. We would have an explosive argument. We'd be screaming at each other. He'd go to his room upset and crying. I'd go to my room upset and crying. This is just the reality. And I think I'm not alone in this, because as parents, we're faced with so many challenges. We're trying to hold so many things down and juggle so many things. And then when we have these moments with our kids where we feel like we're getting disrespected, or they're behaving in ways that's not okay, we just want to resolve it. We want to help them to see that their behavior is not okay. But the way that we go about it, instead of actually producing the result we want, just creates a lot of friction and disconnection, and actually a toxic environment. And I can recognize that now. And I was recognizing it at that point when my son was getting into his preteens, that, oh my gosh, something has to change here. I'm losing my connection with my kid. I'm losing my connection with my kid. He's dysregulated. He's, having big outbursts. He's having big moments of, meltdowns and all these things. And I am fueling the fire. I am making situations worse instead of better. And so that's when I sought help for myself, and I started working with a coach, and I started to recognize my own patterns and started to really get tools for myself to regulate my nervous system, to understand what's happening in my nervous system, to understand that when I am triggered, my whole prefrontal cortex goes offline and I can't even think rationally. And I'm going to be saying things out of survival mode, out of a fight or flight response, not out of, actual thinking about the bigger picture, what I want for my kid and what I want for our relationship. I'm going to just be reacting in that moment. because I'm dropped down into my stress response, right? I'm not able to access my fully integrated brain when I'm heated like that. And I had to really learn that. I had to really start recognizing the signs and symptoms for when I'm triggered so that I can step away, I can pause and do my techniques to calm myself down instead of just jumping in that moment when I'm really, really triggered and escalated. And so those are the types of, pieces that I started to look at and address in myself and notice just patterns that I'd carried forward from my own childhood and my own upbringing, things that were not serving me. Um, and do the work on myself. And as I started to do that work, it's actually just miraculous what happened in the behavior of my kids. And what I really learned over time was that it wasn't that there was a problem with my kids, there was actually a problem with me. I'm going to say that again because, I'm just being super humble and honest here. There wasn't a problem with my kids, there was a problem with me. And I had to look at that. I had to do some work around that. And when I figured out how to start regulating my own emotions and not escalate situations, learn how to de-escalate situations, learn how to co-regulate. These are things I'll talk about, during this podcast, giving you some tools for doing these things. But when I did that work myself, my kids learned how to regulate their own emotions just because that's the environment I was creating in our home, right? When one person is regulated in a home, especially a parental figure, when one parental figure is regulated and calm in the home, it spreads that throughout the house. Just like someone who is escalated and angry all the time and very reactive, how that energy can spread, the same is true of calm and peaceful energy. That spreads as well. And so we want to be really conscious of what we're spreading and what we're modeling and how we're showing our kids how we can handle conflict moments, how we can handle disagreements, how we can handle, not getting what we want, right? Or handle a boundary that we receive, right? All of those things are things that we show them by how we behave. So I learned a lot about myself and my parenting. And so everything that I share with parents in coaching and all of that is really informed by me doing everything the wrong way first and figuring it out for myself. So I'm hoping that through the things that I've learned for myself, you don't have to do it the hard way as much as I did, that you can get these tools sooner than I did. Because once you have them, you'll start to see that, regardless of what your teen is willing to do with therapy or coaching or, outside support or anything like that, us just changing our own behavior impacts so much of the way they behave, of the way they feel about themselves, the way they show up in the world, the way they communicate, the way they interact, the way they have relationships. So this is a very, very powerful place to start because this is something we have control over, right? This is in my direct control. And so when I focus my energy on things that are in my direct control, it's very empowering for me, right? Because I don't have to wait for someone else to change themselves or fix themselves. I can do the work on myself and have that ripple out a little bit. And hopefully that inspires my team to do some work on themselves too, right? The more we are doing work on ourselves, the more they might want to do it for themselves too. Like, oh, wow, mom did this work and she's really changed. I've even had conversations with my son about this. He's now almost 18 years old. And I was having a conversation around something the other day about yelling or something. I can't even remember what it was. But he's like, you don't yell, mom. You never yell. And I was like, that's amazing that you say that. I'm like, do you remember how it used to be? How I used to yell all the time? And so we had this conversation about how I've done this work on myself. And he was like, oh, wow, actually, I do remember that. And I said, it's taken me a lot of work, but I've learned how to regulate my emotions. I've learned how to calm myself down. And that's why now we can have these conversations without us having a screaming match together. And so he was able to kind of notice like, wow, mom's actually done some work on herself that's made a big impact, right? And that shows them that, hey, if I do work on myself, I can actually change too, right? That change is possible. It's not just possible for our teenagers that have like very, very high neuroplasticity, right? Their brain is very malleable at this age. Our brains are malleable too. We can actually make change throughout the whole span of our life. We're not stuck in a certain pattern or habit. we actually can start making micro changes each day that change the pathways in our brain too, and change our whole experience. So it's so powerful, really, really powerful. So that's what I want to hopefully do through this episode, is empower you to be able to just start making some micro changes that ultimately change the whole dynamic in your home, the whole relationship that you have with your teenager. All right, so that was the first thing I wanted to share. The second thing I want to share is the power of practicing the pause. So this is where we learn to notice our body's early signs of activation. Like, what are the signs and symptoms when we are triggered? Do I get super tense? Does my face get furrowed? Do I feel the heat rising within me? Do I feel like I'm about to snap? Am I clenching my fists? What are my particular signs and symptoms when I'm feeling heated or triggered, or like my button was just pushed? And in the past, that might create an explosive reaction. I want to start being the observer of my experience and start noticing those feelings and sensations as they start to rise within me. And as I do that, as I bring awareness to that, as I start to notice, I can catch myself before I respond, before I react. All right, so that's kind of the goal. This is bringing mindfulness to our own internal experience. And so once I notice that I am about to flip out, right, or flip my lid, as Daniel Siegel would say, I can take a few steps. I can notice it first, and then I can take a pause. I can step away. I can let my team know, hey, I'm feeling really triggered right now. I'm going to go ahead and take some space. Let's talk about this when we're calm, right? Then I can go do some breath work. I can put on some calming music. I can step outside and breathe some fresh air. I can notice what's around me. I can see what I can smell, what I can see, what I can feel, all of those things. Tap into my senses, whatever works for me to calm myself back down. And that might take a while depending on how big the trigger was, right? I live up a big mountain, and so it takes me about 10 minutes to, drive down this winding road. And so there's been times I can remember in the past where, one of my kids have said something to me that just like triggered me so much. And I just really wanted to react or scream or do whatever I might have done in the past, those old habits, those old patterns. And I caught myself. And then I had to drive them down to the hill to school, or maybe I had to drive myself to work. I can't remember what. But the entire winding road down the hill, I will be, doing my box breathing the whole way down. I'll be like white knuckling the the steering wheel and just like deep breathing, just whatever I can do to calm myself down. And I don't engage in that conversation or whatever it is until I can calm myself down. I've had moments in the car with my son where, he said something to me that really just got me heated, and he could tell instantly, but I just don't say anything. And he's just like, oh gosh, I'm sorry, mom. I'm sorry, mom. And I just don't say anything. And I just really work through it until I'm at a calm place. And I remember this one day in the car where finally I felt regulated again. I felt calm, and I just put my hand out open, and he put his hand in mine. It was like, okay, we're good, right? Like, so just those moments where we catch ourselves before we get into the heat of battle, right? So really, really practicing noticing when we're triggered, when we're about to explode, and stopping ourselves and pausing. And we can have those conversations with our teenager too beforehand. Like, hey, I'm really working on regulating my emotions and not yelling anymore. And so when I notice some signs and symptoms that I'm about to freak out or flip out, I'm going to practice pausing. It's not that I'm mad at you or that I'm leaving the conversation or that we're done. It's just that I'm going to take some space, and I'm going to invite you to take some space in that moment too, so that we can all calm down, and then we'll come back to finish the conversation once we've calmed down, right? And that's going to teach them so much. Like, oh, wow, I can pause before I respond. I can take space for myself to get myself regulated and to get my brain back online so that I can respond in a way that's going to be helpful instead of harmful. So really, really powerful stuff. All right, the third thing I want to talk about is starting to let go of that power over dynamic, right? So often, like how we were raised was this idea of because I said so, or my way or the highway type of experience, right? Where I am the adult, I am the parent, you do what I say because you're in my house under my roof. These are my rules and you will follow them, right? Just very authoritarian, very black and white, right? This is how it is, deal with it. And I just want to invite a little bit of a peeling back of that, a little bit of letting go of that power over dynamic, because when we have power over, we do not have connection with, right? And so it's not that we are releasing our authority as a parent. We ultimately have to make choices and decisions to protect our kids' safety, or to help nurture respect and good communication and good behaviors, right? Being kind to people and showing empathy for others, things that are really important. It's not that we're letting go of that type of influence or having that influence. We're actually giving ourselves more power with having influence with our kids when we don't do it in such a domineering way. All right. So, really leaning into collaboration, to respect, and all of that. The same ways we would talk to a friend or a colleague or to our partner. We want to really give that same level of respect and care to our kids, right? And so, if something is important to us, a rule or a boundary or whatnot, we can have these conversations in a way that is not so harsh and not so black and white. So if I bring it back to, what's in my control versus what's not in my control. If my teenager comes in the door and they are in a mood, right? Maybe they throw their backpack down and they say something really just rude and disrespectful. My inclination might be to jump in and try to control their behavior. You can't talk to me like that. How dare you? I would never have spoken to my parents like that, right? These very like overbearing, guilt trip type of statements that we can make to get them to fall in line with how we think they should behave. Like that's me trying to control them, right? I ultimately cannot control them. I can't control my teenagers. They're going to make their own choices. I can make requests. I can make boundaries. I can have expectations, but ultimately they are going to decide what they're going to do with those expectations, whether they're going to push back against them or they're going to respect them, right? So in those moments, instead of trying to control their behavior, I can again bring it back to myself, right? What do I have control over in this moment? I have control over noticing that my teenager's having a hard time, right? They came in and they were really grumpy and they took it out on me, right? And so instead of me trying to control their behavior, I might come in with some curiosity, like, hey, bud, what's happening for you right now? Like, did you have a hard day? Or, gosh, that did not feel very nice. I don't appreciate being spoken to like that, but I can tell that you're having a hard moment. So I'll just give you some space right now and we can talk about it later. Whatever it might be, we just want to start to invite their thoughts, their ideas, their opinions, their feelings. We want to bring them into the conversation and understand that things are nuanced, right? That they have a lot of complex feelings and ideas. And if we just go in with like no room for compromise, no room for flexibility, what that ultimately does is it creates resistance, it creates rebellion, it creates pushback, it creates them disconnecting from us and not wanting to be around us, right? And ultimately, what we really want is these amazing relationships with our kids, right? So we actually go against what we're trying to accomplish in those moments. We're trying to get them to behave certain ways or do certain things. But when we do it in an authoritarian way, they want to resist. That's part of their wiring at this age, right? They want to have some empowerment, some control, some autonomy. And so if we're laying down laws with no room for flexibility, instead of them actually following along with it, they're going to maybe pretend, maybe lie about it, and then they're going to go do their thing, right? And so inviting them in, finding compromises, having real conversations with them about what's important to them about this, right? And then finding some mutual ground to stand on, okay? So that's point number 3, is just letting go a little bit of that power over dynamic and moving more towards connection and respect. All right, so point number 4 that I want to talk to you about today is the power of co-regulation and mirror neurons. So our nervous systems are constantly communicating with each other. So when we stay calm, we literally help regulate our teen's body and emotions. So co-regulation is basically what happens when one person's calm helps another person calm down. It's our nervous systems communicating with each other, often without words. So when we're staying steady, when we're breathing and we're keeping our tone gentle, our teen's body picks up on that safety and starts to settle too. So it's how babies learn to feel safe in a parent's arms when you're rocking them and singing to them gently. But the same thing is true for teenagers and even for adults. When we can regulate ourselves, we become an anchor for our kids and they can borrow our calm until they can create their own. So I'm sure you've all experienced emotions and energy being contagious, right? That when someone walks into the room who's anxious or angry, you can feel it instantly. Or when someone's really calm and grounded, you start to relax too. That's partly thanks to something in our brains called mirror neurons. So mirror neurons are special brain cells that mirror the emotions, facial expressions, and even body language of the people around us. They fire not only when we do something ourselves, but also when we see someone else doing it. So if your teen sighs and slumps their shoulders, your brain actually picks that up and mirrors the same pattern and vice versa. It's one of the reasons co-regulation is so powerful. When we can stay centered and calm in our own nervous system, our teens' mirror neurons start to pick up on that energy instead of the chaos or tension. It's a biological reminder that we're constantly influencing each other, not just through what we say, but through how we are and how we show up with our kids in all of these moments. Another important part of co-regulation is also repair, right? So repair moments matter more than perfect regulation. Okay, so when we own our mistakes and start to calm ourselves after we've lost it and go back and apologize and explain, that we went off track, that really models resilience and accountability for our kids, right? So we're not going to do this perfectly. I don't do it perfectly, even though I've learned a lot of tools over the years and I do so much better. I still have my moments where I don't behave in a way that I wanted to behave, or where I snap, or I lay a guilt trip, or whatever it might be that I wish I hadn't done, right? And so instead of just playing it off like I'm some perfect parent and I don't make mistakes and I make it seem like, it's my kid's fault in that moment, I can own it. I can say, hey, you know what? Like, hey, I didn't really love how you just spoke to me, but I'm really sorry. I should not have yelled, or I should not have done this thing that I just did. I should not have said that. I'm really sorry. I hope you can forgive me, right? We have to show them the way with making things right when we don't act perfectly, right? Because we are all humans. We're never going to act perfectly. We're all just doing our best in any given moment. And as we know better, we do better. But in the meantime, when we mess up, right, we just let them know, like, hey, I messed up. I'm sorry. I'll do better next time. I'm going to work on this, right? I'm still working on this. I'm a work in progress. So that's a big part of all of this too. Okay, so the fifth and final point I want to make today is that change is a family process. Growth does not happen in isolation. If one person changes, the whole system has to adjust. So when parents do their own work, it creates a ripple effect that allows teens to feel safer, seen, and more open to change. So what I keep coming up against in my coaching with young people is that they're doing all this work on themselves, right? They're learning how to regulate their emotions. They're working with their thoughts and their mindset and their focus. But if nothing is changing in their home life, right? If they're still having explosive interactions with their parents, if their parents are not allowing them to take space in a moment when they're dysregulated, like, we're not done with this conversation, where do you think you're going? Get back here right now. I'm still talking to you, right? So a teen might be trying to take some space because they feel triggered and they don't want to explode, and they're learning how to pause before responding, but then their parent won't let them go pause, right? It's very hard for them to practice the tools. And so if we really want our teens to be able to change and incorporate new healthy habits and patterns, we have to simultaneously be doing that work on ourselves, right? We have to also be working on learning how to regulate our own emotions, learning what they need in order to regulate their emotions, right? If we know, hey, we need to have space when we're triggered to calm down, but we're not allowing our teenager the space to go calm down, then they can't really regulate, which is what we want them to do. We want them to be able to regulate, but we're not providing the space for them to do that. So if you're in a situation where your teen has been, dealing with a lot of anxiety, a lot of dysregulation, a lot of explosive reactions, isolation, even some depression or, lack of confidence, all of those things, right? If you are, noticing these things in your teenager and you're wanting to get them support to work on these things, I would really, really invite you, while they are getting support for themselves, you get support for yourself, right? You also do the work. You show them like, hey, I understand that it's hard to change and I'm willing to change too. It's like us telling our teenagers to only have a limited amount of screen time and plug their phones in downstairs and all these things around their screens, but then they watch us over there scrolling endlessly. We have to do the work ourselves that we want to see them do for themselves. Like, don't drink monsters. Don't have so much caffeine and sugar as we binge eat ice cream and have monsters all day long. We need to actually do the work ourselves. We're not above doing the work. We have to actually do the work too. And the more we can all get on board as a family and do this work together and check in with our own growth and talk about our wins and the things that we're still working on, repair after we've made mistakes, then we've got something really happening that changes the whole dynamic in the home and can change each of us individually to grow and evolve and become better versions of ourselves. So teens cannot just change in a vacuum. They need a unit. They need the support of their parents. And that's what I find so hard sometimes when I'm just working with a teen and then parents are not doing their own work. They won't put that energy and effort in, but they expect their teenager to do it. And there's a disconnect there, right? There's a disconnect there. And there's no shame or blame. We have lots going on, we're doing our best all the time. I'm always going to say that. We're always doing our best. I'm just as guilty of this as the next person. What I'm trying to do here is just invite you into the process of healing, right? Not just for your teen, but for ourselves. We can all grow. We always have more opportunity to continue to grow. And the more we continue to step into our own growth throughout our life, the richer and more expansive and more beautiful our experience becomes. The more capacity we have to juggle all the things on our plate, the more capacity we have to be mindful in this moment and notice how beautiful it is and how much we have to be grateful for. The more we can enjoy this dream of ours to have a family, to have these children that we brought into the world. This is for many of us, like our lifelong dream was to have a family. And, maybe we're not enjoying it like we thought we would, but we can, right? We absolutely can. This can absolutely be the best part of your parenting journey so far. But it's not just about fixing your teen. It's not just about fixing your teen. It's about healing ourselves. It's about doing our own work also, right? Let's do this together, right? That's one of the reasons this podcast is called Parents and Teens Rising. We're doing this work together. So anyway, that's the invitation. I hope that feels helpful today. So let's go ahead and move into our wrap up. And I just want to take a quick moment to remember all the things that we just covered. So first, I shared my own story of moving from being dysregulated and reactive to calm and grounded, to remind you that if I can do it, you can too. And then second, we talked about the power of taking the pause for ourselves and for our teens. Next, we explored letting go of that power over dynamic and shifting towards mutual respect and collaboration. And then the fourth step we talked about today was looking at the importance of co-regulation and how our calm literally helps regulate our teens' nervous system. And then finally, we talked about how real change has to be a family process. It can't just happen in isolation. So what I'd like to invite you to is to, just select one thing that you heard today that really resonated with you, and just move towards that one thing. Just take one little step towards it. That might be, really starting to notice what your triggers are. That might be really working on taking a pause. It might be, apologizing when, you have already yelled or something like that. It might be really seeking support for yourself, to have your own growth and healing as a parent and as a human. Whatever that might be, just find one little gem that you took today that hit home, that you had an aha moment around, and take one step this week towards that. And if you have tried to do all of this on your own already and you've been struggling, and you're ready to connect your teen or yourself with coaching support, just send me a DM on Instagram at jasmine.guidedpassages, and that's Jasmine with a Y. And I would be happy to connect with you about it. We can schedule a free call. We can chat about what's going on in your dynamic with your teenager, what's going on for you as a parent, whatever it might be. Feel free to reach out. Just drop me a DM. And just to close, I just want to say I'm so honored that you took the time to listen today. And if you're still here all the way at the end of this episode, that's amazing. Thank you so much for just listening to me and my thoughts and insights today, and for being a part of this community. And please don't hesitate to reach out or let me know what else you'd love to hear on the podcast. And if you loved this episode, it would mean so much to me if you could take a moment to leave a review and a rating. That will really just help to, amplify this message and get this to more parents and teenagers who this could benefit. So that's it for today. Love you guys, and I will talk to you soon.